Yeah, so since we look at this schedule here, there's been some criticism that at least I've heard recently about Ohio State schedule's not any good and why are they number one? Well, first of all, you have to subtract the loss that they ding on everyone. So the composite record of who they've played is 0-7 against them. So it kind of weighs that number down to a certain extent. Um, so there's intent in scheduling, and then there's what actually turns out. So the schedule looked pretty daunting, not like a gauntlet, but from week to week. But obviously, Texas, the number one team in the country, Penn State, Michigan, and then tricky trips to Illinois and Washington. So it looked like a pretty difficult schedule. Now, Washington and Illinois, you can play either side of the coin on that. That they're pretty good teams, they're top 20 level teams, or they're really not that good because they got kicked around a few times.
Yeah.
Obviously, Penn State's nothing close to what they've were supposed to be. Obviously, Texas, let's wait and see on Texas. They may still be a factor. It's only 5-2, and they still have plenty of opportunity to show that they're talented and will live up to that. So it's almost like the Indiana situation. At least this is the way I approach it. Indiana doesn't play anyone in the non-conference. That's their issue. I will hammer them and go crazy about the Indianas and the Rutgers and the Marylands who choose not to play anyone because that's their decision. And Penn State because they choose to play no one. Now, in terms of the conference schedule, they can't do anything about that. It still needs to be evaluated, but they obviously, Indiana should not be apologizing for who they played last year in the Big Ten. They're handed a Big Ten schedule. Same for Ohio State. Just because Penn State turned out to be off the rails was nothing that Ohio State could control, of course.
Well, I mean, the beginning of the season, Texas was 1 and Penn State was 2. So, I mean, when the season began, it looked great. I don't think, again, I write a thing every week, where should Ohio State be ranked? And I think you got to do 60% of it off how good is the team, relatively speaking. And that could be, comparatively through NCAA rankings, defense, offense, and all that, the look test, everything else, game control, all those kind of things. Like, is this a team that's just sliding by on the skin of its teeth? Whoever that was that beat Arkansas last week, A&M, 45-42. I mean, do we really give them credit for gutting out a 45-42 game against a 2-4 Arkansas team? No, hell no. They should get no credit for that. But, it is what it is. It's another win, and they're still undefeated. So, I mean, I compare their undefeated to Ohio State's undefeated, and there's no comparison which one's better. So, I mean, Ohio State hasn't played a 2-4 team down to the wire. So, again, it's all apples to oranges comparisons, but I kind of look at it 60-40. I want to know how good you are. How good are you in 60%? And then the other 40%, I'll go resume, who you've played, records, scores of games, all these other, factors that kind of come into it, just because, again, you could have the best team in the country and not play such a great schedule. And then when you get matched up with the best of the best, one of two things happen. You either shrink in the moment, or you are the best team in the country and you prove it. So I think there is something to be said, though, for being battle tested. I think you've got to play some tough games like Ohio State did last year before getting into the playoff. I mean, the Penn State, Indiana, and Michigan games were all, tough games for Ohio State. They blew Indiana out, but, again, tough game on the whole. So, yeah,
Oregon.
I just look at, Oregon. It played Oregon earlier. So, I don't know. I think at the end of the year, everyone's strength of schedule is going to be relatively close to one another. I mean, if you're in the Big Ten and the SEC, and right now, 4 of Ohio State's 7 opponents are 5-2. I don't know what Ohio University is. I know that Grambling's an FCS school. I know Minnesota is one of them. Wisconsin's
What?
obviously 2-5. So, yeah. So I think the other four are 5-2. So, to me, that's pretty good quality, And of those 8 losses, Ohio State's 4 of them. So against other teams, they're combined 20-4. So I don't know.
I played this game, Steve, with somebody who called the other day and was railing on Ohio State's schedule. And I said, absolutely, Texas is not as good. Penn State, I get it. But I did the same thing. I said, let's look at the record of these teams because they were trying to compare Ohio State's schedule against a couple teams in the SEC. And I started in on the record. They said, well, who have they beaten and who have they beaten? Well, if you really take it down the path, you can chase that tail all over the country. But you can also at some point say, Minnesota's 5-2. It's not the most difficult 5-2, but it's reasonable. It's solid. It's a legitimate 5-2 record against legitimate competition. They do play Nebraska and Ohio State, and they have played some good teams. So yes, the Washington's 5-2. They've lost to the 2 best teams in the country. The Washington lost to Michigan. I was thinking Oregon. But anyway, Washington's beaten some good teams. So, yeah, you can chase that around forever. But Ohio State's schedule's not quite as easy as a lot of people would think it to be.
Well, it's when you're like, well, who have they beaten? It's like you're already siding with, the Big Ten only plays against Big Ten teams, so you're going to dismiss all of those wins, and the SEC plays in the mighty SEC, so you're going to lift up all of those wins. But Texas A&M has a 6-point win at home over a 3-4 Auburn team. It was a 7-point game late in the fourth quarter at home against Florida, who is probably 3-4 at this point, something of that nature. Yeah, 3-4. So this is the number 3 team in the nation. I do wonder if LSU has anything left to them, they should beat Texas A&M this weekend. But I don't know if they do. I don't know if they've quit or if Brian Kelly isn't enough. But Texas A&M they've won some close ones, but not necessarily been great doing it. And now they and Miami are propping up Notre Dame's playoff bid, because how can you knock Notre Dame for those two losses early in the season against 2 top 10 teams? And it's like, well, I mean, they're top 10 for now. We'll see where they finish.
I mean, they went on the road and beat Washington, tough place to play, by 18 points. They're 5-2. Went on the road and beat Illinois, 70,000 people. They're 5-2, beat them by 18 points. So, I don't think they have to apologize to anybody. And they did make the effort to play Texas, who everyone knew was going to be the number 1 team in the country to start the season, and may very well still end up, in the playoff if they can string together some wins here down the line. If they get to 10-3, either win the SEC or, lose the SEC, 10-3, I think they may still get in.
I've been hearing all season that Nebraska is an improved football team. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think they're Rutgers, basically, if you take everything away from their brand and their stadium being filled and all that. That Nebraska, I went on a rant about this after they lost to Minnesota, but still, they're a football team that has a pulse, that has some talent, and Minnesota just beat them by 18 points, and Minnesota's 5-2, and nobody else is beating Minnesota 42-3. Nobody else is doing that to Minnesota.
Yeah. In Nebraska, to me, they can't lose in that manner if they really want to be accepted as legitimate, which Matt Rule is fighting to do that. And it's curious that they lay such a big egg, just days after all the speculation that he could leave to go to his alma mater at Penn State, that you just wonder if the players psychologically are like looking at each other and like, okay, what's there to do in State College, But it to me, that was an outlier to me, that you can't go in there and lay an egg like that. And this Big Ten, it can help Ohio State or it can hinder Ohio State. And right now, the jury's out on that.
Well, once all these, this is all I know, is when I evaluate these leagues, once they start playing each other, they all go 500. So we can sit there and we can evaluate the level of play, and there's nothing wrong with that, or the distribution of the power within the conference. There are top heavy leagues, there are free for alls like the Big 12. There's all sorts of composition within the league. But I know that once they start playing each other, they all go 500, regardless of how good they are. So the best way to evaluate them is a very inexact way because they don't play enough non-conference games to do it. But you got to look at the non-conference games.
Mm-hmm.
They don't play enough, and they don't play like seeded non-conference games. You know, you got all these Alabama, Wisconsin kind of matchups, and what do you do with that? You really can't do much with it. So there are very few cross-conference matchups and results throughout the country that mean a whole lot. Texas A&M, Notre Dame would be one, Miami, Notre Dame, those kind of games, Texas, Ohio State, but then that gets discredited by some.
What I've found over the years is to do it the way ESPN and other national pundits do it is that if the SEC is beating the Big Ten in bowl games, that's all the proof you need. If they're not, it's because they didn't want to be there. I don't know how else to get more scientific than that.
That's very scientific. That's an approach. That's as approaches go. That's one of them. So, yeah. And it is very telling, just to watch, some of the college football live and some of the other things that they produce on a weekly basis. Just some of the dumb bullshit that comes out on those shows. And you have the Emmanuel Acho or whoever that guy, his uninformed takes usually are pretty good too. So yeah, they got any number of people on those shows that either have a bias or don't care enough to actually research things to find out what the actual story is. But if you watch Ohio State play, there's no way you can watch them play and not say that's a great college football team.
Yeah, for sure.